What's up, YF Sportsman? It's Lamont. We're back with another podcast episode, and today we got a special reaction for you guys. The video finally came out. I've been hearing about this interview for some time between Draymond Green and Kevin Durant, revealing what actually happened in that particular fallout against the Clippers a few years ago, which a lot of people felt actually led to Kevin Durant leaving the Golden State Warriors. Today, we're finally going to get to the truth. But I think this interview had a lot of great moments outside of just that particular incident. I know that's something we all want to talk about. So what we're going to be doing here is we're just going to be doing a reaction to this entire video. Obviously, we're going to play it. We're going to stop it. I'm going to give you guys my thoughts on each particular segment and just try to break it down as best as possible. Again, if you guys already saw it, just make sure you jump in the chat, man. Give your thoughts and opinions on this particular interview. Maybe give your thoughts on anything that I'm saying. And really, it's all really going to come down to, do you believe it's genuine? And I think that's ultimately what's going to come down. Do you think KD's being genuine? Is Draymond being genuine? And we're going to get to all of those things here in a second. Before we get started, make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell to the video if you haven't done so already. We're grinding to 30K subscribers. We'll be there soon. Salute to everybody that's helping the platform grow, donating, hitting the like, or even hitting the dislike. So salute to everybody for that. But we're going to go ahead. We'll go ahead and start with this reaction. Again, piece by piece breakdown of this interview. Again, there was a lot of things that I really wanted to break down and touch on. Some, especially early on in this interview, that a lot of people might have missed because they really wanted to get to some of the juicier details of this interview. But we're going to go ahead and break this video down.
What's up, man? I appreciate you coming on. It's my show, Chips. Obviously, it stems from exploring that chip on your shoulder, what drives us and makes us who we are and why we're here today. So thank you.
No doubt, man. Thanks for having me, bro.
So take me on the journey. Coach Brown, your first coach, how was that and what did he teach you?
He taught me the fundamentals. I mean, it felt like fundamentals of the game, but it was like truly fundamentals of life. What it's gonna take for me to survive as a human being, a maturing human being. He put this game in front of me, told me the fundamentals of it, the balance of the game, the history of it. I just started to understand that for one, but also started to see life a little bit clearer too. It was one of those special times in my life that I always revert back to, you know.
You hear the cliche saying.
And I want to ask you guys, I know a lot of you guys are athletes. Do you guys have that one coach like KD? Because I don't think many athletes have this particular story. Because high school basketball, high school sports now has become so selfish and objective oriented. You got coaches trying to move up to the next level. You got players just trying to position themselves to get scholarships. It's like every man for himself in that world with prep schools and AAU basketball. It's like agendas everywhere you look. Can anyone name just that single coach that was just looking out for your well-being? I don't think we see that anymore. I know some players now, they have like handlers who are going to follow them wherever they go, but you rarely see that now with coaches. You rarely, even at the college level. I mean, I've seen some college coaches, man, get opportunities at D1 schools and will literally leave in a year or 2 years when the next best opportunity comes. There's literally no loyalty. It's all money and career driven. I think that's ultimately going to hurt the game sooner or later. I don't know if we'll see the impacts of it now, but man, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this but KD's story right there is kind of powerful because you just don't see that in basketball no more.
And of everything you do at game speed. To me, that is the most cliche statement in the world.
Yeah.
Except for when it comes to you, you actually do every rep game speed. Does that come from him or does that come from somewhere else?
Yeah, he built the foundation. And the cliche stuff, I mean, I am cliche. I'm simple, I'm efficient, I'm to the point. That's what my game is. And a lot of the best stuff to me is cliche. So I just tried to approach every workout like a game, every game like a workout.
And then you go to high school and you went to several different high schools.
Yeah.
How did you feel about that then? And looking back on that, how do you feel about it now?
So back then, I didn't know it was any different. I was listening to my Coach Brown, my mom, my pops, like this was where the best competition was. So I would switch schools every year to move up a level.
People have tried to make that connection of you being at several different high.
And that's another issue. What Katie just mentioned there is, and I can understand where he's coming from. I can give an example of my own, where when you're dealing with really talented high school players, but they may find themselves playing in a city with such low-level competition that no one takes anyone in that city seriously. I'll give you an example. In Indiana, Indianapolis, Gary, Indiana, Fort Wayne, these are in South Bend. These are the 4 major cities in Indiana. If you are a product out of any one of those cities, you're considered a high prospect, especially if you can really star in those cities. But if you're in one of the smaller cities, Columbus, Lafayette, any of these smaller cities in that area, you could be just as talented as any of these guys in these major cities, but you will never be looked at or respected like the guys in those major cities. And so what you will see then is you will see these players in these smaller cities trying to find ways to get to schools or even prep schools in these major cities so that they can get the recognition for what they're doing. Because ultimately, like I said, it's all a game at the high school level. Until you start doing it against the best of the best, no one's going to take you seriously. And so because high school basketball has become so political, what you see a lot of these players doing now is they almost have to kind of go from school to school to try to find better opportunities, because if you're stuck in the wrong city and nobody's looking at basketball prospects over here, or nobody's considering prospects over here, taking them seriously, I mean, you're going to be ass out. So, I mean, there's, like I said, from what I said earlier, it's a kind of a fine line of some of the things you have to juggle there. But ultimately, he still said he had his coach following him around. So it seems like his coach was somewhat of his handler. Maybe that's the route to go. But ultimately, all in all, I think it still is hurting the game. Because there's, high school basketball is really non-existent now. With prep schools and AAU basketball, high school basketball's really lost its luster. And it's not looked at as prestigious. It's not looked at like it was, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. It's not looked at like the same. So, I mean, again, changing times, but players kind of have to do what they need to do to get to the big stage.
High schools to now you being on 3 different teams. What do you say to that or those people?
Yeah, I mean, I feel as though at each spot, even in high school, my game was growing so fast. I need to be in a different environment to see how farther I can go.
And why Texas? In my opinion, Texas is a football school.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's a football state, but underneath all of that is some incredible athletes on the basketball side. It was just a perfect situation. And then being in Austin, it was like, the city itself, it wasn't a normal college town. It was like being in a major city, so it was perfect for me.
I know growing up in Saginaw, for me, being the tallest kid, everybody always wanted me to play center. Mm-hmm. And I was fortunate enough to have my uncle who just taught me how to dribble and taught me guard skills, mm-hmm. but I still always end up throwing at the center. Whereas you're 7 feet, and you'll never admit it, but you're 7 feet. You never played the 4 in your life till you came to Golden State, really. And
I played a little bit in college because I couldn't dribble that well, but I was still on the perimeter most of the time.
And when we went small, that's when you would play the 4. Whose idea was it like to never just stick you on the block because you were always taller than everybody?
Coach Brown and Coach Chucky, like they would see me every day just running up and down the court, like no ball in my hand, just running around with kids. And they seen my agility outside, running, playing football and stuff, so they seen that I wasn't just a stiff. So
you calling me a stiff, all right, Coach.
I mean, nah, you ain't no stiff, dog. And you're not even big, bro. You like 6'6", like, and you play bigger than what you really are. But most guys that's tall and skinny, they can't really move at the same times. And I always wanted to be a point guard and shooting guard. I was just growing so fast. So some coaches did just stick me underneath the basket. But if I get a rebound, I go coast to coast. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. If I shoot a jump shot here and there. So I was showing flashes, but it wasn't like this. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. I developed this over time.
I remember reading a statement where you said,
I've seen that happen a lot as well, and I think this is what happens. I think a lot of young kids get underdeveloped when it comes to basketball because of what KD just talked about. Because you may have a kid, 4th, 5th, or 6th grade, they just might hit an early growth spurt. They might be bigger and taller than everyone else. And coaches may start playing that kid at the forward and center spot early on his career. Just kind of limiting what they can do, not teaching them any ball handling skills. You know, and that player may only grow up to be 6'6", 6'7", right? In the NBA, that's a guard. If you're 6'5", 6'6", 6'7", you're gonna be on the wing. You're not gonna be posting up. And so I've seen so many kids' skill levels get destroyed and decimated by the time they get in high school because you have so many coaches who just stick them under the basket and make them centers because you're the biggest player on the team. But they're not taking into consideration that when you get to the college level, when you get to the high school, when you get to sometimes high school, but definitely college and NBA level, you're really not going to be that tall. And so, I mean, look, if you have a kid, if you know any kids that are hitting that growth spurt, I mean, KD had some really good handlers from the sound of it, because it would have been so tempting for any coach to say, I have a matchup nightmare right down there on the low post. Let's stick KD down there, right? And they don't even bother. And this is what I mean by when coaches have agendas. See, when coaches do that type of stuff, it just simply means they're trying to look good to get the win for themselves. But when they do things like that, especially when you're dealing with kids at a young age, it's not for the betterment of the kid. All right, so you always want to be mindful of that, man. You always want to watch the development of these kids. If you have kids of your own, if you have players that you're developing, be mindful of what these kids are going to look like 5, 10, 15 years from now, not just what you can get out of them for that particular season. I think that's the selfish outlook. So, I mean, you got to appreciate that. But like what KD said, even if you are a player and you're in that situation, sometimes you kind of got to show the coaches, look, I can do more. So he said, I would get the rebound and I'm taking off going coast to coast. And sometimes you have to kind of go outside of the box like that to show these coaches, look, I'm more than just a center that you can stick under the rim.
I'm tired of being number 2. I was the number 2 pick. I was the number 2 player in the country. Where was that coming from? Like, and why did you feel that? Like,
yeah, because we had just lost in the finals. Mm-hmm. And I felt like we was right there every game. And people was like, man, good job. Man, y'all did great. Like, you guys are young, y'all be right back. And I was like, I don't care about that. I wanted to win that series and I want to win a championship. And that's where that came from. I was just, people wanted me to accept being second so much. That was never my mentality ever, always to win the game. And, I appreciated people like respecting my game, but I was like, I wanted more for myself. And at that point, that's how I was feeling.
First 9 years in OKC, and then you decide that you leave in OKC. And you ultimately decide to come to the Warriors, knowing that the scrutiny would be there, knowing that, everybody would say the Warriors were this great team, but you still ultimately made the decision. Why was that? Was that driven by, I don't give a fuck what y'all think, this is good for me? Or was that just, was it strictly just a basketball decision?
It was a basketball decision, but I knocked down the not giving a fuck ladder with that too. You know what I'm saying? It kind of knocked down 2 birds with 1 stone with that. But it was mainly, I felt like I was the absolute perfect fit with what you guys were doing on both ends of the ball. And I knew my game had reached a point where I needed to really see what that looked like. And I thought that was just a no-brainer. I would do that shit a million times. And, again, I didn't second guess at all. And I knew that's what I wanted to do when I was going into these meetings. But I really just had to confirm, go through the process. But I knew from watching the games, just looking at interviews, just seeing everything that y'all about, it's like that's the way I wanted to play, and that's the way I need to go to, continue to keep getting better as a player. So once I tunnel vision on that, I knew everything would come afterwards, and it was just me going through that experience and see how I was going to deal with it. And shit, it went perfect.
You then do 3 years there.
See, the beauty in what KD did was all KD did was what we see on basketball courts and in basketball across America in almost every gym. The best teams get the best players. All right. This has come from street ball. This goes to YMCAs, to high school, to college. I mean, when you look at the Duke universities, Duke University does not waste time figuring out ways how they can balance the tide and balance the level of competitions. They go collect the most 5-star recruits that they can, and they try to destroy the competition. The same thing with John Calipari at Kentucky. The same thing we see at a lot of these top-tier schools. They collect the talent and they go try to win. All right? And nobody knocks it. It's not until you see these players get to the NBA level where you have fandom and fanfare at such a high degree. You got fans jealous because this player didn't go to their team. So now they try to come up with hateful narratives just to spew towards them. People don't realize, just like what Draymond Green said, Kevin Durant spent 9 years, that's about a decade, with a franchise. A franchise that was absolutely nothing when he got there. Right? He turned them into something, and then even when he turned them into something, he literally watched this franchise make mistake after mistake in free agency. One of the biggest mistakes that they made is by allowing James Harden to walk in free agency for essentially nothing. And when you see that you have a great core, a great team that got you to the finals, and your front office and your team is just being cheap, and it seems like they're just putting the whole entire load of winning on your back. They're not trying to create a great team so you can build a dynasty. It's time for these players to seek different avenues to win. And I think 9 years with one franchise is more than enough time for a franchise to start building. All right. And I think it's because of players like KD and players like LeBron James. This is why we see the Milwaukee Bucks doing all that they can to build around a player like Giannis. And they made it worthwhile for him to stay. All right. This is why we see those things happening. All right. When you look at the Chicago Bulls and that young core over there, we see that Chicago Bull team saying we're going to go for it all. When we get a good core, we're going to go for it all. And we're going to build around the core that we have. All right. And try to stay competitive. Those are the tendencies that you want to see. And it shouldn't have had to take players like LeBron James and Kevin Durant leaving their respective teams, going elsewhere, because you're dealing with some of the worst front offices in the NBA. So again, kudos to Kevin Durant for making a great basketball decision. Because the best basketball decision is always going to be to partner yourself and join up with other highly talented basketball players. It only makes sense to me. I mean, and that's only if you're being honest. That's only if you're being honest. We deal with too many people that come up with this fantasy fictional narrative that you're supposed to go and try to balance the competition and make these games as hard as possible when that's not the case. You only make the games as hard as possible as long as you have to. If you get drafted to a franchise and you have to grind it and fight it out, okay, fine. But it gets to a point in time where these organizations have to start building around you so that you can have an opportunity to not just win one championship, but to win multiple. That's the goal right there. And that's, like I said, will we see that with Giannis? Because we've seen that Buck team already lose pieces. We got to see.
2 championships, would have been 3 had you not got hurt.
Easily.
But in my opinion, after year 2, you were over it. You were done with it, and you were on to the next thing. But we had the opportunity to three-peat. And in my mind, what brought you back to Golden State for year 3 was just the opportunity to three-peat, but it didn't feel right for you no more. Am I right, wrong?
That's interesting because a lot of people, that's just a talk around me the last few years, and I get what people are saying, because before I got to Golden State, I was just happy-go-lucky, like just bright-eyed to the experience, not knowing what was ahead. By first year, I knew exactly what we needed to do in order for us to win. Every night, I knew what my role was to the T. Teams before, I didn't quite know what my role was every night. Did I have to be the scorer? Did I have to be the facilitator? Did I have to get other guys involved? Did I have to make threes? I knew exactly what my role was, and I locked on it with so much focus and determination to not fuck around every day. And you've seen it. From workouts to practices, shoot-arounds, film, I was super locked in, and it made people on the outside look at me like, hold on, is he enjoying this? When I dive into something like that, with that level of focus, I don't want to be anywhere else in life. That's the most enjoyable experience I ever had after that first one. If that was the case, I wouldn't have played 78 games that year. I would have just waited to the end of the season and try to play in the playoffs. I played every game. I went hard every day. I cared about every matchup, no matter who was on the floor. Just my look didn't feel as like energetic or opening as it was before. And I like that. I like that I was closed off and focused on my work. I just maybe should have communicated that with more people who were interested in knowing what I was going through, but I had the most fun locking in and completing the task. You know what I'm saying? Because I knew we was gonna win every night. And it's rare to get to that point as an NBA player. Yeah. Knowing you're gonna win every night. So I just try to focus in and stay in the moment more than anything.
And for my
again, KD came, and this right here should tell you. What KD just said right there is something that I've always said. We have no idea what's going through the minds of these NBA players. We can only look from our vantage point and take a number of guesses. But what's actually going on in that locker room, what those players and personnel and coaches actually see behind the scenes, is something completely different. You know, because if you think about what the media narrative that was getting pushed around that time, the media narrative that was getting pushed, especially in that season after they won the second chip, going into that third where they could potentially three-peat, it was that there was a lot of media narrative saying KD didn't want to be there. KD's out. He's on his way out. I mean, there was a lot of things that the media was putting out there for talking points. But now that we hear directly from KD, we see that a lot of those things were very fictional, kind of made up narratives that the media was pushing, because the media as well was taking these things, looking from an outside in vantage point and only really taking wild guesses. That's going to lead us into the next topic, because obviously, as you guys know, Draymond Green is going to get into that very, very crucial incident against the Clippers that a lot of people felt led to the breakup of Kevin Durant and the Golden State Warriors.
For my own personal sanity, because I've been getting my ass kicked ever since you left. So just for my own personal sanity, how much did our argument against the Clippers drive you to ultimately lead the Warriors?
It wasn't the argument. It was the way that everybody, Steve Kerr, act like it didn't happen. Bob Myers and tried to just discipline you and think that would put the mask over everything. I really felt like that was such a big situation for us as a group. The first time we went through something like that, we had to get that shit all out. I remember watching The Last Dance, and when Scottie didn't go into the game, the whole team in the locker room said, "Scottie, that was fucked up that you did that." We needed that. We just needed to throw all of that shit out on the table and say, "Yo, Dre, K, like, that was fucked up that we even had to go through that. Let's just wipe our hands with that and go finish the task." I don't think we did that, and we tried to dance around it. I just didn't like how all of that, just the vibe between all of that, it just made shit weird to me. And I'd rather us be who we say we are, family first. Communication is key. Like, we didn't show that, and that's what rubbed me the wrong way more than anything.
When we landed back from
See, this is one of the critical components to being a great coach. This is what KD just talked about is something that Phil Jackson was able to master, and it's called player management, managing egos. All right, managing locker rooms, designating leaders. Because if you in the comparison that KD gave when he talked about when Scottie Pippen chose not to go back into the game because Tony Kukoc was getting a shot after the game, because a lot of people thought Scottie Pippen was the locker room leader. No, he wasn't the locker room leader at that time. All right, because they talked about how it was Bill Cartwright who stepped up. And it was some of the other older vets in that locker room who really stepped up and said, "Hey, that was messed up." And they aired out their grievances amongst the players right there. And as coaches, it's hard to it's hard to tell your team they have to find a way to coach themselves sometimes. And when it comes to incidents like that, that's called everybody on your team holding everybody else accountable. And when you see one player mess up so gravely on the court, not out of fear that KD would leave, but just because it was something bogus and should not have happened and been publicly displayed like that, your teammates, not the coaches, not the coaching staff. The coaching staff needs to instill the leaders to make everybody accountable, but it's the leaders on that team, the Steph Currys, the Klay Thompsons, the Iguodala's. Those are the players that need to step up in the locker room behind closed doors and have that meeting amongst players and say, hold on, Draymond, we got to hold you accountable for what you just did out there. And that's what KD was talking about right there. But again, if you've been a coach, this is something that you've probably experienced and dealt with. And sometimes you have to learn the hard way, because if you don't learn it, I mean, you're going to lose your team. You know, I've lost teams and I've had to get teams back coaching wise. You know, I've dealt with similar incidents, fights in practice. People, you know what? But you have to find a way to get the team, the players, to hold other players accountable, because the coach can't always do it. It's different coming from coaches or even GMs like KD said, but when the players hold you accountable, it hits different with these players.
LA, I sat Hazel was sitting in the car for an hour and 45 minutes. They pulled me in that room at Signature for an hour and 45 minutes, and they tried to tell me, you need to apologize. And I told them, I'll talk to Kay, but y'all aren't going to tell me what I need to say. Mm-hmm. And, you know, they went on for an hour and 45 minutes saying a bunch of bullshit. And ultimately, they realized, all right, we're not getting through to him. We're going to try again in the morning. And so we met the next morning, and they said, all right, you slept on it. You ready to apologize? And I told them right then and there, I said, y'all about to fuck this up. I said, the only person that can make this right is me and Kay. And there's nothing that y'all can do, and y'all are going to fuck this up. And in my opinion, they fucked it up.
I think so too.
And they told me right then and there, like, we're going to suspend you for this game. I laughed in their face, literally laughed in their face. And Bob said to me, he said, wow, that was not the reaction I was looking for or expecting. And I said, well, either I'm gonna laugh in your face or I'm gonna cuss you the fuck out. So you pick, I'm gonna choose laugh. So I think what you're doing is funny, and so I'm gonna laugh. And so it's interesting to hear you say essentially the same thing that I told them that day. But, you know, and moving past that, kind of.
Again, the best way the organization, and you know what? I can understand the panic from the GM, because remember, everybody in the media is already talking about KD leaving. Yeah, at the time, the rumors were KD's headed to New York with Kyrie Irving. I mean, you're hearing this every day in the media. KD's quiet on what he's going to do in free agency. So nobody really had a good idea of what really was going to happen. Everyone was clueless. All right. So when this incident happens, I think now you have a big overreaction from your GM, your front office, even your coaching staff, where he said these guys were saying, Draymond, hey, you need to go apologize and make it right. And Draymond's like, hold on. Maybe that's not the way to go about doing it right now. There's other ways to do it. You know, I think the best move would have been to just allow Steve Kerr to go talk to some of the leaders, the Iguodala's, Steph Curry's on that team, and say, look, y'all need to have a team meeting. Y'all need to all hold Draymond Green accountable for what happened. And y'all just need to air everything out in their own team meeting right there. And I think with some of these incidents right there, you could tell that verbal spat was personal. It got personal based on some of the things that were said and exchanged. All right. It affected the play on the court, cost them a game. When you see those things happen, those types of breakdowns in the game, there's no type of coaching, there's no type of front office moves that can fix that. Only the players can fix that. And maybe that's a weakness in Steve Kerr's coaching philosophy. Maybe he hasn't instilled in his players the culture of holding each other accountable. Because if Steph Curry and some of those other leaders in that locker room, if they had that in them, they would have took it amongst themselves to address and rectify that. And there would have been no need for Bob Myers to suspend Draymond or take all of this action just to put on the front as if they were upset about what happened with this particular situation. So I'm glad that they aired this stuff out. Because again, it goes a lot into coaching and what how overcoaching and overthinking situations based on media pressure can combust a team, and that's exactly what we saw here.
Along those same lines, you've now played with Russ, who I think has an incredible chip on his shoulder that sometimes goes too far. Myself, who has a chip on my shoulder that sometimes goes too far. Kyrie, who has a chip on his shoulder that sometimes goes too far. And James, who has a chip on his shoulder that probably sometimes goes too far. And playing with all the guys that you play with, that you could say, he probably go way too far.
We all go too far, bro, and we all got major chips on our shoulders. There's a million of us. Imagine a million people trying to run into this door right now. Somebody gonna get elbowed, kicked, pushed over. Like, we all trying to fit into a one-peg spot. Millions of us trying to fit into these 12, 15 spots on teams. So we gotta have that chip on our shoulder, and I always appreciate the people that acknowledge that it's tough to make it to the league. And I had to kick a lot of motherfuckers down to get here. I had to shun a lot of my friends and sacrifice a lot of the personal shit that I loved as a kid so I can get here. So we all of us naturally are underdogs, got chips on our shoulders because it's hard to make it to this point. But the person that went too far was always Draymond Green. To the point where I felt like you were trying to establish that you're not playing around. Like, you're not gonna walk over me, even though I was a second-round pick and I'm undersized and I'm not as skilled as y'all want me to be, or I don't play the way y'all traditionally like for people my size to play. I felt that same way about Russell Westbrook because of his story. I felt that same way about James Harden because I know his story from, like, when these dudes was kids, what they had to go through as everyday people, not just on the court. It's hard to make it through life every day. You know what I'm saying? Where some of these people come from. You know, so I started understanding that about people. I'm realizing, like, now I see why they show their ego, they show the pride that they have, they show the chip that they have on their shoulder, because it's hard as shit to make it every day. You know what I'm saying? But you pushed it to the limit where it's like, it's cool for me to be who I am and be and not apologize for it all the time. Because, you know what I mean, you ain't mean no harm to anybody, but shit that you want it done, you want it done. And we all respected that. And we all kind of looked up to that as guys that come into the league and want to fit into this system so bad. You know what I'm saying? Like, wanting to be a part of this whole thing. Then you realize you see dudes who just going by their own little pace, and it's like, oh, that's more so of my rhythm. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of the guys that I play with, from Russ to James to Kai to Steph to Clay, they all kind of move at the beat of their own drum. That encourages a lot of people to do the same shit, not just basketball players, but people in general who just watch us. Dealing with everybody every single day, I start thinking like that, and I start seeing the beauty in all of this shit.
To watch you early on.
Hey man, more gems right there. And I think what KD broke down right there, it just kind of goes to show why some of these players, for example, just like he said with Draymond Green, are so hated. You know, when you look at Draymond Green's, when you look at his accolades and everything that he's accomplished in the NBA, you still have a lot of people that will really disrespect this man's game. You know, they will really go at him personally. They will automatically attack the fact that they believe he's the one that caused KD to leave just because of media speculation without knowing the truth. They will talk about his inability to be able to make jump shots at a high clip, but fail to talk about his great defensive prowess. And then even when you talk about his great defensive prowess, you see a lot of people try to make up narratives and say, well, who has he stopped from scoring 30? As if that's what determines if you're a great defensive player or not. And it's just, so what he's saying is these players always have to play, especially to get to the NBA is hard. Hold on, first of all, you have to look at, to get to D1 basketball is extremely difficult. And then to get out of the top 1% of D1 basketball and get to the NBA is extremely tough. And then when you get to the NBA, now you're fighting and vying every single year for your spot. Similar to Draymond coming in as a second round pick. He couldn't mess around his first 2 years. He was liable to get cut at any particular time. If he had a stretch of bad play for 30 or 60 days, it's over with. He's probably cut from the team. And so the only way you can manage and keep that up for multiple years until you get that big contract or you get that real opportunity, you have to consistently play with a chip on your shoulder. And we saw players like that. We saw how Kobe played with that chip on his shoulder, having to come off the bench early in his career. We saw T-Mac play with that chip on his shoulder, coming off the bench early in his career. We see a lot of players. We even see Jokic. When Jokic started off in Denver, didn't really get that opportunity. And he played with a chip on his shoulder. Now he's an MVP of the league. I mean, we see it all over in the league, but these players who play like that, cream generally rises to the top. And we usually see these players become greats. Guys who don't, guys who just there because they were talented, guys who are just there because, you know, for the money, those guys generally trickle down and kind of weed themselves out and maybe even expose themselves to a certain degree. Because either they don't live up to the level of expectation, similar to a guy like Kwame Brown. You know, you get that number 1 overall pick, but he's not playing with a chip on his shoulder. He's coming into the league playing as if everything's supposed to be handed to him. Remember, listen to what if you compare everything that KD just said and then think back on everything that Kwame Brown has said. Kwame Brown talks about how I thought he said I was going to be traded to another team. He talks about his situation, but he never talks about playing with that chip on his shoulder. If Kwame Brown would have took all of that anger and the doubts and said, you know what, I'm going to internalize that and just simply focus on getting better, lock down, putting in that work in the gym, we probably would have seen a different Kwame Brown. But we ultimately didn't. So I think KD did a great job of just breaking that down, just kind of separating the players that make it in this league from the players that fail.
On in your career, like you said, you was the happy one. You was the kid that carried the backpack. Nike started a backpack line because you always, and you to this day, you still carry a backpack all the time. And so there's this common misconception that you're not the kid that carries the backpack anymore. I still think you're the kid that loves basketball and carry a backpack.
Yeah.
But over the course of the years, your answers to the media, how you deal with the media has changed. Why is that? Is that just who you grew into? Is that because of the way they act with certain shit? Where did that?
I felt like the media knew more than me. I almost had them on a pedestal of like, they got more history, knowledge of the game, they more experienced than me in this area of the NBA. So once I started to get more experience and realize like, oh no, they can never be what I am or know what I know or understand it the way I understand it. Some of the questions, they didn't seem so intelligent to me anymore. People wanted to praise me more than I liked or hate me more than I liked, make a big deal out of so much other shit. And I was just like, this game is simple to me. So some of the stuff that y'all asking really doesn't move me the way it used to. I just, start to see life different. I can see this game different. So, of course my answers and questions, about what goes on is gonna be different too. So I just chalk that up to just maturity and experience.
And speaking,
Hey man, KD is so correct because, I don't know who they hire. I don't know who these media outlets, I don't know who they hire to go in after the game. But when I go back and listen to some of the questions that they ask these players, it's just like, did any of you players actually hoop? Because if you actually hooped, or if you actually understood the game at any degree, you should know after, especially a loss, the best questions to ask. And the best question, something like I say, I remember one time there was a question about, they were challenging Russell Westbrook right in front of Kevin Durant, after a loss. And it's just like, why would you do that? It makes these players not have any respect for you. And then anything you ask now gets looked at as a stupid question. I mean, I listened to some of the questions that they ask after a loss. Like they'll ask a question like, do you guys think you could have did anything better to win the game? Yeah, I think all of these players think after a loss there was a lot of things they could have did better to win the game. So I'm just like, man, as a basketball player, you know, I think maybe in these spots right there, I think these reporters, the media does a very poor job of asking questions that can really get these players to give real basketball answers. You know, and we talk about that a lot on this channel because as fans, we are dying to hear the basketball answers. We don't want to see KD blow up on the media when they ask a dumb question. We want to really hear the basketball answers. This is one of the reasons why the WNBA struggles to such a degree. They're not giving us any real basketball answers to anything. When you look to the WNBA, we don't know who the best players are. We don't know who the best matchups are. We don't know who any of the rivals are. We don't know nothing about the WNBA. All right? The only thing that the WNBA is pushing is the relationships between women and all of these things, everything other than basketball. Oh, they were pushing. They all got new jerseys, you know, but what do these jerseys mean if we don't know who they are? Like, so again, all you have to do, I don't care if it's the WNBA, NCAA, high school, all you got to do is just feed us real basketball and we will come watch at any level. Just feed us real basketball, give us real basketball content, ask real basketball questions, and we're going to chime in and listen. All right? Because all it's going to do is help feed all of our barbershop conversations. This interview right here between Draymond Green, they're sticking to mostly basketball. It's not really getting personal. This is going to stir up a lot of barbershop conversations because there are going to be a lot of conversations where, look, I told you it wasn't because of Draymond. And then you're going to have the other people say, oh, maybe they just put it on to deflect blame from Draymond. I mean, at the end of the day, regardless of what you believe, it stirs more basketball conversations. And that's all that you can ask for. The NBA's done a very good job of it, but the media closely connected to the NBA, I think that they've done a poor job, especially over like the last 5 years, of putting media in front of these guys in this post-game situations, asking the right questions to give us basketball answers. I think they ask questions to get drama and dramatic answers as opposed to getting real basketball feedback. I think that's probably one of the few criticisms that I can give to the NBA at this particular time.
In the media, social media, obviously, we were teammates when you got caught with the burner account. One thing I love about the burner account is everything that you said on the burner account, you just started to say on Kevin Durant's account.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't like it, as you know, most people voice. They don't like how you respond to some fans or how you respond to this, how you are always tweeting. What do you make of people's reaction to you responding to fans? And if you think something, you send it.
Yeah. I just think people are still upset that I went to the Warriors, and a lot of people who are Cavs fans who enjoy watching the Cavs beat y'all before, which is a lot of people. I didn't realize that till I got there. A lot of people enjoy seeing y'all lose in 2016. And a lot of those people were upset that we were so good. And they're still upset because you do the same shit on Twitter. Damian Lillard does the same shit on Twitter. CJ McCollum does the same shit on Twitter. We all do the same shit on Twitter, but for me, it's a problem. I mean, I chalk it up to just me being so good at what I do and playing with a team that was so great, and we fit so well. Nobody likes a great thing. And I guess I was the cause of that great thing because I came and joined. So it's way deeper than what I do on Twitter, and I understand that. And it's funny to me at this point because you can't erase what we did. You're never gonna erase it, and you know you love watching us play. You know what I'm saying? So
I think it's the best era of basketball ever, in my opinion.
But that's really what it is. So many people still upset with me that I chose to play basketball for the Golden State Warriors, which is sad at this point because it's almost a decade later. since I made that decision, you know what I'm saying? That's never gonna stop me from engaging with fans, because at the end of the day, I'm only talking about basketball. I'm not diving into politics. I'm not telling you how you should live. I'm not flexing my money or my power or none of that shit on you. I'm just literally talking about the game, you know, and what I see. And I don't think it harms anyone.
I would love to see D-Book win a championship, but in my opinion, the finals does not compare to Warriors, Cavs, Warriors.
Nah.
Even Warriors, Raptors. Do you have any regrets about that, knowing that we probably would have won 5 more championships?
Nah, I don't have any regrets at all. I felt like we did exactly what we were supposed to do. And I wish it would have three-peated, because that's rare. And we were like right there. But I don't have any regrets at all, because I feel like if we just stay healthy with the Nets, we had a great chance to finish it too. So, no, I mean, being hurt for that year really changed my perspective on everything that I was doing and everything that I did before. I looked at that time with playing with the Warriors as so special to me, but it was time to move on.
So now you're in this space with the Nets, and you know everybody has made this big deal about Kyrie and you know his beliefs and him missing games, and just like we all do, he got his shit.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are now saying that is what's going to cost y'all ultimately of reaching where y'all want to reach. What do you make of that?
I mean, I just think people don't like Kyrie because he wanted to leave Cleveland and he wanted to leave Boston. I don't think it's any deeper than that. He doesn't harm anyone. He hasn't said anything that's disrespectful to anybody. His game is beautiful to watch. I just think people don't like the decisions on where he chooses to play. And they sort of amplify everything, because everybody in this league has their shit. They may say something over a course of 6 months that everybody may not agree with. That's just the nature of our business. You know, when you're that good at what you do, everything is a little amplified, and sometimes it's a little extra, you know. So what Kyrie does, especially in our building, nobody is making a big deal out of it. Just like a lot of shit we did in our building, we didn't give a shit if Clay missed practice. Like, who cares? Like, as long as you're there for the games, as long as you healthy enough to play, like, we didn't give a shit. Like, when you and coach cursed each other out, literally as soon as the practice was over with, it was cool. Like, you know, so it was like everybody's mature enough to understand, like, we come to work, we handle our business, and you be who you are.
Family, you.
Man, I believe Draymond Green is extremely strategic with his questions. And you got to appreciate what he's doing, because what he's doing with all of his questions, literally from start to finish, all of his questions have literally addressed almost all media narratives against him, against KD, even against Kyrie Irving, as they just spoke on right there. Some of the misconceptions about players missing practices and things like that. He's literally done his homework and said, I'm going to make sure when we sit down, 2 stars of this league, we're going to be honest about all of these questions. And we're specifically going to answer all of these questions in situations where the media has spun narratives where no one has the real answers but the players. That situation with Kyrie missing games and this, that, and other. KD just said it right there. Players themselves, players inside of that building, they didn't care. And ultimately, what he's saying makes some sense, because when the playoffs started, they all looked like they were firing off on all cylinders. I even had to give the Brooklyn Nets props, because I said defensively, it just looked like they hit a switch and they were able to play great defense. I didn't think they could do that, but they were able to do it. He talked about Klay Thompson. Klay Thompson missing practices. Nobody made a big deal about it. Klay Thompson's there for the game, and when he got to the games, what did he do? He hooped. He balled out. He did what he was supposed to do. Draymond Green arguing with Steve Kerr. You know, if you listen to some of these talking heads on YouTube, whether it's Ticket TV, you got Carcino, you got ESPN, you got Stephen A. Smith, all of these people say Draymond Green is gonna get somebody traded. All right, or not Draymond Green gets somebody traded, but Steve Kerr's going to trade Draymond Green, or this, that, and the other. They come up with all these talking points that nobody can prove or disprove. And they come up with these talking points to clout chase people's misconceptions about the NBA. And I'm telling you guys right now, this conversation is going to shut down a lot of those talking points. A lot of people are going to have to retract a lot of statements that were made. It's crazy. I like what they're doing here. I really appreciate how Draymond Green asked these questions. I appreciate the honesty and sincerity of both players. I think this is probably one of the best interviews I've heard in a while. We're gonna go ahead and wrap this up. Let's finish it out and hear the rest of it.
Like, you know, so it was like everybody's mature enough to understand, like, we come to work, we handle our business, and you be who you are.
Family, you have no kids. You're now 32. I'm 31. I got 3 kids. I'm 31, so I took a little different route.
You're OG now, man.
But you have no kids. Why? Do you want kids ultimately? Do you not want kids?
I mean, that's a big commitment for one, and I always felt like I was just really zoned in on my work and my alone time and my free time. Too much for me to like lock in on something like that, you know? And eventually I do want that, but the older I get, I think is the better, because I'm maturing more, knowing myself more, understanding my situation a little bit more. So if I were to invite someone in or combine my life with another person, you know, it'd be perfect at this time, as opposed to me 10 years ago. I wouldn't know what to do. So I think I'm as long as I wait, you know, it's only gonna be for the better.
Do you ever worry that the longer you wait, your kid won't understand who Kevin Durant is?
I'm glad he won't understand. Because I don't want him to have to feel like he's pressured in this bubble to do what I did, you know? And as long as I'm playing, like, this bubble is always going to be about making it to the NBA. So if you see a little KD out here, nothing but you expecting him to be a basketball player. So, like, I don't know if my kid are even going to be that tall or fall into the game like I fell into it. Who knows? So I'd rather just me tell him, you know, over time what I did. I don't want any pressure for anybody that's coming into my world to do what I like to do. I want them to explore things on their own.
So what's next for you? You got
Hey, you got to appreciate what KD says right there. You know what I mean? You know, when you're so laser focused in on being great at basketball, for some people maybe having kids is secondary to your career. And it's just like that, to each his own. But I like what he said right there, because even in these basketball conversations, right, that we talk about Jordan's sons not living up to being who Jordan was. All right, we talk about Dell Curry and his sons. Will they all live up to him as a basketball player? I mean, that's the bubble that you end up putting your kid in as an NBA player if you invite them into that life too soon. Because I think ultimately they feel as if they need to live up to that hype. And then we see a lot of kids get burnt out on basketball. You know, they get up to that top level. When you look at when we look at some of the best players, when we look at Doc Rivers' son, when we look at Austin Rivers, it almost looked like Austin Rivers just kind of lost his love and luster for the game of basketball. Not saying that he's not a great player, but once he got to the league, it was just like it almost felt like he was just kind of wiping sweat off his forehead. Like, man, I got here. That's pressure. You know, I lived up to my dad's expectations. You know, and that's what it kind of feels like. So I think he made a great point right there, just about family and life in general. And I think a lot of people miss that point. And in these basketball conversations, I think we, even having these NBA debates, we miss that point as well.
You know, probably 10 more years left for hooping.
I hope so.
What comes after that? Have you gotten there yet, or are you still just so locked in on basketball that it's just that?
I definitely want to stay involved in the game. I'm learning so much now. I don't know where I could use it at. Coaching, GM, ownership, I feel like I'm gathering so much knowledge that I could be useful in any part of this game. But outside of that, I have other interests in tech world, media space, art, all of that stuff that, you know, I enjoy doing in my leisure time. You know, I want to get involved in at some point. But for now, you know what I'm about. You know what I enjoy to do every day. So until that time is up, then we'll see what happens. But I feel like I'm setting up stuff on the back end of things that I can have options.
You know, I think people look at us and they say, oh man, you play basketball for a living, you should be happy, which is great, right? Like, you love basketball, I love basketball. Being able to do that and make the type of money we make is incredible. But with that comes a lot of fucking scrutiny, comes a lot of headaches. What is the happiest you've been as a professional?
I don't even like to use the word happiness. That's just a fleeting feeling. It can just go so up and down. I don't want to chase that feeling. It's just not a efficient way for me to live. I feel like just having peace and really simply just enjoying being alive every day is the best place for me to be. You know, I don't want to be happy and sad. Like, I don't even want to have to go through that. I just want to just kind of float through life. I experience so much. I just want to take on every experience for what it is and enjoy it in a moment, you know? So I don't want to chase happiness, you know, so that I just try to stay even.
I respect that. Appreciate it, bro.
Man, that was incredible talk,
yes, sir.
Brother.
Thank you, thank you.
No doubt.
That's Chip, it's a wrap.
And there we have it right there. Kevin Durant, Draymond Green, the interview. Long anticipated. We knew it was coming for a while. I'm sure it had to get through layers of scrutiny and screening. I'm almost positive that this had to get cleared through the Warriors front office first before it aired. I mean, I'm sure, you know, like I said, that multiple layers had to be involved, but ultimately it dropped. I felt like, again, the questioning was on point. I think Draymond Green did a good job of angling all his questions toward flagrant or false media narratives. And now those things can't really come up to taint the media anymore. It's going to be hard for people to now bring up anything with regards to Kyrie Irving missing games or being absent from the team for whatever reason, especially now that we know it's not going to have a detrimental effect on the team. All right, it's going to be hard for people to talk about Draymond Green's fire and intensity, maybe even clashing with head coach Steve Kerr, when they just spoke about how it happened all the time in practice, and at the end of practice, bygones were bygones. Everything was back to normal. I mean, it's going to be hard for people to bring up the altercation between Draymond Green and Kevin Durant on court and still point the blame at Draymond Green and say, oh, you're the reason why KD left time, because from the outside looking in, it looked as if what you did pushed him away. And then you had talking heads around YouTube magnifying that false talking point. Again, all you have to do is go look around YouTube. When you look at the Carcinos, when you look at the tickets, when you look at the ESPNs and Stephen A's and all of these people, they all magnified that negative talking point. But it was only the people closely connected to that team that actually knew the truth. And it wasn't until now that we said that we finally heard the truth. And I'm glad that the truth finally came out in this particular situation, man. But make sure you guys let me know what you think about this video in the live chat. This is going to be a live preview, obviously. Please let me know. Make sure you hit the comments up. Let me know what you think about this video in the comments. Again, I thought it was one of the best interviews. And just like I said with the post game, you have a player-on-player interview. You get a much more in-depth and personable response from both players. See, and I think when these players at the end of a game, when emotions are still high, you know, at the end of the game, especially after a tough loss, I know when I dealt with that, I'm still running through segments of the game in my head that I wish I could have did differently. Sometimes after a tough loss, it takes me a couple days to get it out my mind because I'm rewinding different scenarios in my head. But dang, I wish I could have did this different. I wish I could have reacted like this in situation. I wish I could have did this better, that better. And then for these media outlets in the post game, even pre-game, or even at the halftime, to ask some of these ridiculous questions that sometimes it's not even basketball related. It just sounds like they're trying to get a soundbite out of some of these players. It just almost makes it not worth it. And when you look at it from that perspective, you almost can kind of understand why Kyrie Irving said, I don't even want to deal with the media. I'll take the fine. Kyrie Irving amassed almost $2 million in fines. We didn't even hear the team complain about it. They just paid it and we moved on. Because I think to some degree, I think everybody understands. Everybody understands. But again, salute to these two, man. Salute to these two. Draymond Green and his new podcast called Chips. I'm definitely going to be checking out more of his podcast because, I mean, if he's going to have interviews like this, imagine what's next to come, man. So we definitely going to be checking out this podcast. It's actually on Bleacher Report, man. You guys go check it out yourself. The link to the original video is going to be in the description of the video. But, man, make sure you check it out. Watch it again and again. But like I said, salute to these two for bringing us one of the realest NBA basketball-related interviews that I've seen in a long time. Hey, but it's FYF Sports, man. It's been another great podcast episode. We got a lot coming this week. We got a lot of podcast episodes dropping. All right, a lot of new things coming. All right, we got some new sponsorship partners that you're going to be seeing soon, and you don't want to miss it. You don't want to miss it. So, again, make sure you stay tuned. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Make sure you follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, so you don't miss a beat with FYF Sports. Hey, but it's FYF Sports, man. It's been another great podcast episode. We'll be back with more sports and news later, even more reactions. But until then, it's FYF Sports, and we out.